Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us here at Remnant House, the home of the strong and very courageous, for our weekly news update, where we like to be informed without being overwhelmed. It's one of the things we like to say around here so that we are not subject to the anxiety trip that they love to put on everybody. Yes, we watch the events that are unfolding, and many of you are starting to figure out that these events are being almost like they're being scripted. It's almost as if somebody is following along some type of scripting with an intention of actually getting to a certain group of people. And maybe you're starting to figure out that this is a bit too coordinated and a bit too orchestrated to be incidental. And so, if you're one of those people that are starting to see the patterns and starting to understand and discern the mind games that we are finding ourselves in, well, welcome to the 10,000-foot view. I think you're going to find some other people that are starting to wake up and say, wait a minute, let's put these pieces together just a little bit differently than maybe they'd like us to, right? I think they want us running in the streets, pulling our hair out, going, the sky is falling, or the world's going to end any minute now, neither of which are true. What can happen is a complete waste of your time and energy, wasting your gift, wasting your abilities upon the earth, wasting that opportunity that's given to each of us as we are alive on the earth. And so I believe that our enemy is constantly warring against us, and we are admonished to redeem the time, for the days are evil. For those of you joining us for the first time, we do have this great website, remnantwatch.com. It's a labor of love, and it's something that we provide as a family from Remnant House. There's this banner at the top that'll always bring you to the latest broadcasts. And we carry the stories that we're watching. And of course, you can always search back. Previous broadcasts are available, or previous stories from previous broadcasts. And then we have this handy guides up here for survival should disaster strike. And since we have put those up every week, it seems like there's more confirmation for us to have those sitting there. So we have yet to find a good reason to take them down. And there's more even disasters on our news array tonight. And so we just have to continue to remember that these are the days that were predicted to come. And we're watching again, as I said, a bit of a theatrical performance, but that doesn't mean that it's not lethal. That doesn't mean that the stakes aren't very high and that lives aren't being lost, because I believe they are. And so that makes it even worse. It makes it even more sinister, more wicked, because events being manipulated with lives actually being lost just for a mind game, just for mind control. Well, that's beyond wicked. And we know that the lights are coming on. And as they do, we are going to see the day approaching. And with that, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story is killer robots, AI psychosis, and nuclear war. Great. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's just go ahead and put AI in charge of weapons, put them inside of robots, and let's see what happens. Oh, wait, we have movies that will tell us what happens. We don't need to do this because we know we've already seen the Terminator, killer robots, AI psychosis, and nuclear war, the Pentagon's biggest AI fears. AI technology is poised to transform national security. And in the United States, experts and policymakers are already experimenting with large language models that can aid in strategic decision-making in conflicts and autonomous weapon systems, or, as they are more commonly called, killer robots, that can make real-time decisions about what to target and whether to use lethal force. So this is essentially putting robots or machinery above human life. This is a horrible mistake. But these new technologies also pose enormous risks, as I've just said. The Pentagon is filled with some of the country's most sensitive information. Putting that information in the hands of AI tools makes it more vulnerable, both to foreign hackers and to malicious inside actors who want to leak information, as AI can comb through and summarize massive amounts of information better than any human. So, what are they just telling you that they are able to do with AI? Well, they just told you that it's able to summarize massive amounts of information, which is its real intention, folks. Its primary intention seems to be a surveillance tool meant to keep sort of a temperature, and as it again summarizes massive amounts of information. Okay, so we knew some of this. So I mean, you had to not be paying attention. You had to have your head in the sand for the last 30 years to not be paying attention to the movies they were putting out, the dropping of hints they were making, all meant to drop these things into our psyche and essentially get us to call it into existence. So be careful with being tricked into some of these things. And again, they're acknowledging that these are very powerful tools. And so it's not as if they don't know what they're playing around with is dangerous. They know. They don't care. All right. These are very powerful tools. And there are a lot of questions, I think, about the security of models themselves. And the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense of Cyber Policy during the Biden administration told Politico magazine in a wide-ranging interview about these concerns. And I do believe that the reason why they should be concerned is because you have malicious programmers. You have people programming who do not have the best interests of the American people, or humanity for that matter, at heart. And one of the things that we discovered in developing some of the tools that we were able to develop to counteract some of this effect is that they are in fact empowered to program. And that means that if the thing lies to you, it was programmed to. Kaboom. If it misleads you, programmed to. If it takes the long way, like a cab driver that takes the long way home on the way back, from the airport, it was programmed to, just so you understand that. So when they're telling you this, they're also admitting their capability, and they're admitting some other things along the way if you're reading in between the lines. Okay. And so this is already having a massive effect. And the reason why is not because AI is that much or that efficient and that amazing, but that the American worker has really dropped in quality. And as a result, many of you know this. I don't need to tell you this, especially those of you that are of my generation, or maybe the generation that came right after, where you're looking at the work ethic and you're going, oh boy, we've got ourselves, Houston, we've got a problem. Okay. And so they blame it on the economy. They blame it on a lot of things. But how many know that you need to be industrious in this economy, and you need to go out and be a worker? And part of the challenge is the work ethic, ladies and gentlemen, has been so attacked by devices, by pleasure over productivity, where cheap accolades come from winning video games as opposed to winning contests or overcoming challenges, climbing mountains, doing things that were actually difficult. Now people get the same feeling, the same sense of I'm a great guy by beating some dude on a video screen. And it was a very clever psychological trick to demobilize the population. And so now, as a result of these tricks that have been played, Gen X may be the first generation to need universal basic income after late career job loss. And so this is now becoming an epidemic level issue. Some estimates suggest, and this is essentially a different form of welfare, folks. So this is just another form of socialism under a different guise and a different name. And it's a failure of a process, a failure of education system, and a failure of the culture to enable people to continue to prosper through their lives. Some estimates suggest that half of all white-collar jobs will disappear as artificial intelligence advances. Not because artificial intelligence is that great, but because their competition is that terrible. I hope you're getting that. How will older white-collar workers displaced by the AI revolution fare? Our recent book, American Idol. And again, they're going into some of the information that they've now recently been uncovering and discussing. And it's been going on for a while, this conversation. It's been going on for some time. Can AI replace the worker? Well, if the worker continues to be dumbed down by foolish programming on television, terrible, crazy news network, um, and getting corrupted text and corrupted information, and also manipulated. Here's another one, by date setters operating on partial information. Don't even have all the scrolls. So they're trying to figure this stuff out without even all the information, while they're being laughed at by the manipulators who are playing the masses like they play a piano. Amen. And so those of you that are waking up to that are going, and you're stabilizing in a different way. We'll talk more about that. But nevertheless, this is the reality. Okay. And the narcissistic news. That's exactly right. They're all about themselves, and they can't even see the forest for the trees. And folks, if you thought it was going to be different at the end of the age, well, now you know. They'll be lovers of themselves, as the scripture says. Truce breakers, incontinent, fierce, basically belligerent. And that's what you see out there, isn't it? We have to sit in the corner and hope we don't irritate people, or we get the ire of the, the nasty groups and all that. So, you all understand this battle that we're all in. And this is a reality of the hour that we are in now. And now, of course, AI is sort of coming in front and center, because people in their limited intellect are looking for answers, seeing they were dumbed down to know how to do parenting correctly. So now they need augmentation just to maintain a house. You don't need to turn on more technology. You need to turn it all off is what you need to do. But nope, that's not the direction most people are going. Google has upgraded its virtual Gemini assistant for your home. And you can ask it to fix the dishwasher, find out when your kids went to sleep, and even whether you left the car door open. It sounds so convenient. Did you catch that part about spying on your children, getting them used to the concept right from the child's home, right from the home, that you are going to be under surveillance? Get used to it. It's normal. Get used to it as normal. Okay. And the fact is that is not reality. Reality is that's not supposed to be the case. Nobody has that right. And yet they are straight up sitting up in your living room. Look at these gadgets. I mean, they're sitting right in your living room. And by the way, folks, just so you know, this doesn't selectively record. It records everything. Okay. It records everything. And so this is the thing that we now see coming out. And again, it's the doom of man. They forget. The scandals come out. Oh, the Echo is recording you, and this is recording you. And then for a little while, people stop buying it, right? They just sit back. They wait. Throw a few news stories out there, confuse you, send you off in 10 different directions, come right back out with the same product. If they really got a problem, they just change the name. And they start all over again. And they don't even miss a beat. And why? Because they know that the average person is under so much mind control and so many different. If they don't have them inebriated, they have them medicated. So if they're not medicated, they're inebriated, and that's the vast majority of society. We're running in fear, right? It's just running all the time. Here's another one: the few that are actually working, they're working crazy hard. Most of the people that I know that are hardworking are going, man, I have to work twice as hard because I can't find people that are good and all that, right? So it's becoming epidemic to find good people to work and to be part of positive things. So this breakdown has really affected generationally. It's been amazing what we've witnessed, and it's not been a good thing. So now, of course, should it surprise you that they are now trying to find technological solutions like robots that can do the jobs that others don't want or refuse to do? Okay. And so they're basically looking to replace humanity with machinery. I'm not kidding. This is open and blatant and in our face, folks. Okay. Look at this. Ultra lifelike robot face can blink, twitch, even look around, eerily similar to humans. Oh no, here we go. Robotics company has created a futuristic robot. I think they already have all this, guys. So in all honesty, I don't think this is new. This is old. But it is interesting to watch them sort of release each piece at a time. Oh gosh, we made a breakthrough. We now can get it to wink. And things like that. And they've got these things that look so human and so perfectly like you will not be able to tell. And they're pretending to lay it out piece by piece. That's my opinion. I'd love your thoughts. tech company has created an eerie-like humanoid robot that blinks, nods, and looks around. It's convincingly similar to a real face. And while the creation is yet to be commercially available, a video shared on YouTube shows how the robot head works and so forth. So they're slow leaking this information. And this has actually been going on for a while, where they've been slow leaking, sort of like slow disclosure, to let you know that, yeah, there's some of the people that you're walking around. Okay, some of them are not real. Okay, some of them are robots. Okay, maybe most of them. And then you're going, wait, what? Yeah, some of those people you've been chatting with online, arguing with in an argument, they're a chatbot. They're a chatbot. They're not even a real person. Okay, yeah, they got a whole profile. Yep, you do. They do. They look like they're real. They look like they have kids and everything. Yeah, they're good at this. They'll create a whole family. They'll create a whole story. They'll create a whole thing just to interrupt you and have a conversation. Don't think they won't. And so just understand that this is the psychological warfare era that you have entered into, where deceit is everywhere. Okay, everywhere. So be careful. And now we're seeing countries going full steam. So we saw the UK, right? And they started this whole digital ID thing. Well, that caused a backlash you wouldn't believe in the UK, but that's not slowing down. You can tell that somebody's cracking a whip behind these guys because their own people are revolting, but they're still going forward. And who's cracking this whip? We need. I think you guys can figure out who's the dark force behind the scenes cracking this whip. Switzerland charts its own path on digital IDs, sparking European privacy debate. It's a great debate. In a razor-thin vote, Switzerland has broken rank with European neighbors by approving a uniquely privacy-focused digital ID system that stands in stark contrast to controversial intense initiatives underway in the European Union and in the UK. It doesn't matter which side of the digital ID program you go, you're still dealing with the fact that they are cementing your corporate self. They are digitizing and monetizing the straw man in such a way that they're going to make it near impossible for you to break free. So when you want to sing, I've got to break free, you won't be able to. You won't be able to sing it. You'll be singing in a jail cell or some car that won't let you out. Okay, you won't be able to break free. So you better move now. Okay, I'm not playing. I'm serious. It's not funny. It's funny, but it's not funny. Okay. And you're seeing a lot of things that are one-offs and firsts and historic. And you need to really pay attention when you see these words in headlines, guys. You've got to pay attention when you see the words like this. Okay? That's a tag word. And it was put in quotes, meaning it was most likely a signal word. A signal word. All right? Trump unveils historic Gaza peace plan. Hails backing from Israel, Arab, and Muslim states. So they're gonna bring in what now? This happiness now. U.S. president calls on Hamas to accept proposal, which would see all hostages free within 72 hours. Says backing it was popular thing for Prime Minister to do amid likely pushback from the far right. And so now all of a sudden, the new peace plan is getting some traction in terms of push, if you will. So U.S. President Donald Trump laid out his plan for ending the war in Gaza during a White House press conference with visiting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday, declaring that Washington is beyond very close to reaching a deal after Jerusalem accepted the proposal. So they came up with something that Jerusalem could work with, while Arab and Muslim countries committed to disarming Hamas. Now it's time for Hamas to accept the terms of the plan that we put forward today. So they're just not going to allow Hamas to continue to exist. That would just mean they'll change the name and become something else, but we'll see. Trump said while standing alongside Netanyahu in the White House state dining room after the pair met in the Oval Office for over an hour. So apparently all it took was an hour for them to get together and they could solve this problem. Of course, the Egyptian and Qatari mediators presented Hamas negotiators with the U.S. proposal late last Monday night, and an Arab diplomat told the Times of Israel the U.S. officials are right now, they're hopeful that this peace effort will in fact hold, but I think it has difficulty ahead. I don't think it's as clean as it's being purported. And of course, right away, Netanyahu comes out and says the pen will not be implemented until all hostages in Israel all hostages are in Israel, right? So Netanyahu tells the Gevurah Forum that they're not going to go forward until there's a complete list or complete release of the hostages. And of course, Hamas is afraid that if you let go of the hostages, and that hell they said they're going to break loose, they may just break it loose anyway. Bottom line is that we've got ourselves a very, very tenuous situation in the Middle East, but hopefully we may actually see an end to the bloodshed that is going on in that part of the world, which, of course, would be good to see, because look what's still happening. So despite the effort to call for peace, look at this. Palestinians report new airstrikes after Trump calls to stop bombs. So it's losing a little bit of credibility when you say, yes, we have a deal, and then Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip continued on Saturday, Palestinian sources said. Despite U.S. President Donald Trump's call to immediate halt the bombing in view of possible peace deal, and medical sources reporting casualties from several airstrikes in Gaza City in the morning. And again, the military of Israel does continue to apply maximum pressure on the Hamas infrastructure in the hope, I would think, to bring a swift resolution. And again, President Trump has warned that there will be massive bloodshed if Hamas fails to agree to the peace deal. So that is something that I believe is wise at this point. There's no point. What does Scripture tell us? If you've got 10,000 and you're up against one who has 20,000, you should make terms of peace. That's what the Scripture tells us to do. So that's what you should do. And Trump posted an urgent message on Truth Social minutes before the Hamas deadline. And so again, they did make overtures, and it does look like there is going to be at least an effort. So that part is good. These talks have been very successful and profoundly and proceeded rapidly, Trump said. The technical teams will again meet Monday in Egypt to work through and clarify the final details. So that's what they're doing today, in the hope that they can bring these parties to a conclusion. And you may not have noticed, but Egypt had its bulldozers in the Gaza Strip. So Egypt went ahead and entered into that area. They had amassed their army on the Egyptian-Israel border. I don't know if Israel just didn't want that fight or what, but it looks like they basically walked right in there. So that's interesting. We're going to continue to watch this entire situation unfold, especially as we're talking about making peace with many, right? A peace deal. And who wasn't going to pay attention to that? That was like a no-brainer, right? So, and of course, Hamas did agree to release all the Israeli hostages per Trump Gaza peace deal. And of course, they're always going to try to put certain conditions. And then what did the Israelis do? They just bomb. So Hamas on Friday agreed to release all Israeli hostages, living and dead, but wants to negotiate the other terms of President Trump's comprehensive peace deal, even after the commander-in-chief said there was not much room for discussion. And so, in other words, either you take the deal or we start bombing, and this time we don't stop till you're all dead, right? And so it's not time to be negotiating like that, and unfortunately, this is the situation that they find themselves in. The good news is that it looks like we may stop seeing the death of children and innocent bystanders, at least in this part of the world. But how many know there's a whole lot of things going on that have nothing to do with this part of the world, and we're seeing it manifested in the world in other ways. So just because a conflict stops in that area doesn't mean the conflict won't erupt in other places. A woman in her 60s among 3 terror arrested after Manchester synagogue attack. And this just happened. Manchester synagogue attacker named by police. And of course, this was, of course, in Great Britain. And you're going to continue to see social and political responses in countries and places. Unfortunately, that typically is what follows, regardless of who, negotiates what. You're now going to have to get all the factions around the world and all those who have feelings about this to agree. And that's not as easy as it may look, because there's a lot of hot blood in this situation. And so, of course, when you had these types of things where Israeli minister says the last opportunity for Gaza City residents to flee as it happened. And of course, there was tremendous, intense firepower unleashed on these residential areas and so forth. So again, these are the kinds of backdrops that don't lend well to a peaceful end. They tend to keep blood hot. And then on top of that, you're giving ultimatums, right? So you're saying, hey, you got 3 or 4 days to respond, or you're going to pay in hell. Wow. The Qatari Prime Minister says plan still needs clarification and discussion, as Turkish spy chief arrives in Doha to hold talks with the terror group, which is facing heavy pressure to take the deal. Okay, a day after unveiling the proposal alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump told reporters as he departed the White House that Israeli and Arab leaders have accepted the plan and we're just waiting for Hamas. So in other words, Turkey and the other more cooler heads, if you will, are pushing Hamas and are brokering the deal. And that's what he means, that the Arabs have accepted it. Now, let's get Hamas on board so we can stop the bombing and move on to building hotels or whatever they planned on doing, or a new aqueduct from the Dead Sea, or the Red Sea, rather, or the Mediterranean, right? So who knows what? Maybe they're trying to create their own port. There's all kinds of reasons why they may have done this. Who knows? We're going to find out pretty soon, though. Okay. In the meantime, how many heard? And we mentioned last week that there was a gathering of all the generals. The United States general, he did gather the generals, and some of the speeches that came out were very interesting. How many were a little surprised by some of the content that was presented as important enough to gather an unprecedented number of generals in high command, right? And Trump tells generals the military will be used to fight the enemy within. President Sims says some U.S. cities he considers dangerous should become training grounds for American troops. Now, this is going to be behind a paywall, folks, so we don't cross paywalls, and we don't violate their copyrights. But I do believe that this is a very interesting moment where the debate now is, can the American people, are they now enemy combatants too? Is that what we're now saying? And if so, how do you define that? And that becomes a very scary sort of line to cross, don't you guys think? I'd love your thoughts on that, because I believe that's a very dangerous road to go down. Okay, that's just my opinion. And talking about a road to go down, all of a sudden the United States changed its mind over Ukraine, decides it's going to provide Ukraine with deep intelligence for missile strikes deep inside Russia. This was a very odd story that came out, and I don't believe it's true at all. I think it's just meant to confuse the public, because what I saw and the reporting that I've got on the ground, if you will, is that Ukraine is making overtures of peace at this point and looking to find a way to bring that conflict to an end. So I don't know about this report. I thought this was interesting that it was just thrown out there. And of course, we saw Pete Hegseth, what is he now? The head of the Department of War, right? And he told the generals that they needed to prepare for war. That's what he told them when they gathered at Quantico. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told rare meeting of the most senior military leadership in the U.S. that they must prepare for war. From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this: warfighting, Hegseth said in his speech at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia, referring to the name now used by the Trump administration for the Department of Defense. Preparing for war and preparing to win, unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit. Okay, bravado notwithstanding, here's the reality, folks, and we've been talking about that in this broadcast for many, many, many weeks, going back, that China and Russia, with its confederacy, represent a more than formidable threat to the United States' hegemony. And without a dramatic increase in the weaponry and firepower of the U.S. capability, the war games keep indicating that they would lose. So time is not on the side of the West at this point, unless the West is suddenly going to ramp up, and I mean dramatically ramp up its war-making capability, as Pete Hegseth is saying. It's going to have to accept second fiddle on the world scene. Now, that's really hard for those that have been running things to suddenly accept. So either they're going to have to catch China, they're going to have to sabotage China, or they're going to have to take China on and win. Because if they leave China alone, unopposed, they will just simply outproduce and have so many weapons that you will not be able to defeat them in a war. So this is where I told you guys, this is where we're at. A few more years makes a massive difference. That allows in this case, China and the East nations, opportunity to build up more and more weapons. And that pace in which they're going is so phenomenal that it doesn't take much to figure out that this will be bad. So it is a very, very dangerous moment we're in. People that are losing power, when they lose power, they basically start to, behave accordingly. Now, this is not something that we're concerned about because we know in whom we have placed our trust, but the world will suffer as a result. And so this is why we need to be careful in this hour. And what we're also going to see is very hot blood. You're going to see people operating in a lot of heat, a lot of anger. And so these kinds of things are going to happen. You're going to see mosques. Look at this. A mosque was set ablaze with 2 people inside. Now, come on, guys. Whether you agree with a mosque or not, burning the place down with people inside. I mean, have we reached this level of demonic activity? I believe so. Okay. And so UK mosque was set ablaze with 2 people still inside in a suspect arson attack that police are treating as a hate crime. You think? One man has so far been arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life in connection with the incident, according to Sussex police. Well, I hope they find those people. Listen, I get it that people disagree with other folks who believe differently or live differently or operate differently, but setting fire to a building has got to be the most reprehensible thing you could do. I mean, that is just reprehensible, folks. And I believe this is what we have reduced to because we have lost so much of our moral fiber as a nation, as a culture, as a people, as earth. Not any one nation, just all across the earth. We continue to see it. And as a result of that general collapse, we're also seeing what were stalwart components, things that were part of the economy, part of the world we lived in, part of the normal, if you will, that are now falling apart. And I think this is, in some parts, a result of the dumbing down of the people. You got less buyers. You got less people with jobs. You got less reason to buy a car. Look at this. Auto giant collapse sparks a recession. Fears and haunting parallel to 2008 crash. I think it's going to be worse, folks. Another auto company bankruptcy has set alarm bells ringing and that the U.S. economy could be headed toward a repeat of 2008 financial meltdown. Folks, we're in the middle of a meltdown right now. If you not noticed that the government is shut down. This time the trouble isn't mortgages, it's car loans, which have never been bigger at 1.7 trillion. That's not as high as home loans were in 2008, but experts warn it could be enough to trigger a domino effect reaching mortgages. I believe it's also going to be hitting mortgages and homes because they're overpriced, grossly overpriced. And it's not a sustainable model. So you're going to see a massive, I believe, this is my opinion, massive correction in the real estate market to compensate for that. So I think this bloodbath is far from over in the economy. And I think we're going to continue to see effects, if you will. Now, before we get too far into that, I want to make sure I mention this because there's a mystery fleet of U.S. Air Force tankers crossing the Atlantic, which stirs echoes of Iran. So this portends a different fight. So if they're winding down the fight in Gaza, I said if they're winding down the fight in Gaza and they're still sending over equipment at this pace, folks, we got a different conflict coming. Flight trackers have spotted a fleet of U.S. air tankers crossing the Atlantic just as Donald Trump prepares to meet with generals and admirals. That was last week. So around a dozen KC-135s, Strato tankers were making their journey on Sunday night, with several en route to RAF Milnerhale, a major Air Force base in England, so putting them much closer to the theater of operations should they be needed. I think we've got a problem. They've already indicated that they will not allow Iran to possess certain technology, and that is exactly what Iran went to go and do. So I think we have a situation brewing that goes beyond the Gaza conflict and other conflicts that have been in that region. So we're far from done with this region completely erupting. A quick note, there was another earthquake in the Philippines this time. And of course, it was a very difficult one for them because there's so much poverty in the Philippines and a lot of their structures are not very sound. So the damage to an area like that is considerable. Please pray for the believers in the Philippines that are now recovering from this. And I do believe we're going to see more of that, especially Pacific Rim. There's going to be a whole lot of shaking going on. It seems to continue to be the Pacific Rim and those bordering countries like Russia on that side. And then we're seeing them also on this side in the U.S., in North America. So there's something going on in the Pacific that's causing both sides to react. I don't know how the answer to that. Go talk to Dutch Sense. He knows. That's the guy. He's the man. I'm not the guy for that. Go talk to Dutch. He knows all about that stuff. He's the best at it. Best I've seen ever. So he'll tell you why it's going the way it's going. And I don't understand all that. All I know is a whole lot of shaking going on. There's also a lot of mystery drone sightings reported over critical infrastructure in northern Germany. And we talked about this. Well, it's continuing, folks. They don't have answers for it. Okay, German authorities are investigating claims that unidentified drones have spied on critical infrastructure in northern state of Schleswig-Holstein, officials said Wednesday. So they're continuing to have these drones, guys. Remember, we talked about this, that they were kind of blaming each other, right? So the Russians blame the Germans or the Ukrainians, right? I don't think they know whose drones some of these are. So this is really getting very, very odd. Now, speaking of odd, how many of you saw this happen and went, what? There's a whole lot of red hat wearing people that went, what did this guy just say? How many know there's a lot of people that threw away their red hats right here, folks, right here. Okay, I'm not even going to say this. I'm just going to leave that there, because if you can't discern how that is what it is, then you're not awake enough to even be watching with us. I'm sorry, but this is craziness, and this is exactly what we expected, the double cross. And so there you have it. You have your double cross, and that's why a lot of people are going, "Oh man, told you not to put your trust in a politician." It will not come that way. Your deliverance doesn't come that way. You're suffering for lack of knowledge. People are suffering for lack of understanding. It is that will get you free. In the meantime, what they're doing, they're getting ready. They're saying, "Oh no, you're going to need this stuff. Oh no, people, bad strains are coming. New variants, unusual stuff's going to be sweeping the U.S." I mean, you never know. You might need some of these remedies. And folks, I want to tell you something. You got to be really careful. There's some very, very sharp people out there blowing the whistle on the Internet of Things, how that the human body is even used as a transmission device. And so technology is not your friend in this hour. And many, many people are starting to make the connection, starting to realize that pharmakia will not save you. And again, various things are attributed to diseases, but may not be actual diseases. I hope you guys are pretty sharp. I think you're picking it up. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? So here's a way you can tell. Unplug some stuff. And if you feel better, just unplug some things. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, how come I'm feeling better? Things to make you go, okay? So be awake out there. Be smart out there. And there's all kinds of things that are starting to narrow us up. Things like this. These are very dangerous things too. Unprecedented water rationing. Anytime you see the word rationing, who's making the decision? Who controls it? That's deciding who lives and dies, folks. That's water. Unprecedented water rationing to begin in Washington's Yakima Basin. Drought conditions east of the Cascade Crest are so dire, the state officials plan to cut off water for farmers, ranchers, and more, something they have never done before. Reservoirs in the Yakima River Basin are expected to run out of water early next week, officials within the Washington Department of Ecology said in a release. I've never heard of Washington State running out of water. Never. So this is brand new. Okay, you smell what I'm stepping in. All right. The drastic measure comes on the tail end of Washington's third severe drought in a row. So something has drained all the rain. Something is draining the raining. And for the first time, that part that I in my memory in my adult life, Washington is known for being one of the wettest parts of the country, from my recollection. So I find it astounding that they have a drought to the extent that they're talking about water rationing. That sounds to me like judgments have fallen. Okay. Another thing that was a very interesting noted story, and all of you who are, survivors of 9/11 and all that, right? Don't you find it interesting that two Delta planes collided, ripping off a wing? Now, we know that can't be true because these things can go right through steel buildings, man. These things go right into a building, like completely, man. Like they are so tough and they just smash through everything. I mean, everything. So how could it possibly be that just by bumping into, one another, they created this problem while taxiing at LaGuardia? I kid, of course, folks. While taxiing at LaGuardia Airport, his passengers described the moment as the flights absolutely smashed. They smashed each other. Oh my goodness, look at that. How is that possible? Just bumping into another, they crashed like that? Wow, that's crazy. Isn't that crazy, guys? I mean, shouldn't they be able to go through buildings? I mean, they should be like so tough they can go right through steel and right in there, man, at an angle. Right through. It's like hot knife through butter. No? They just bump each other, start falling apart. Airplanes are notoriously mega weak. Even just hitting a bird, you'll see like the whole nose cone of the plane is completely collapsed in and hit a bird. Yeah. But they got everybody believing they flew right in. Yeah. See why you got to be awake, guys, and not be medicated or inebriated. It's reality. It's almost laughable how dumb it is. But there you have it. And by the way, guys, I want you to really be careful about giving your children your devices and using that as a way to, hang on a second. Using your devices as babysitters is a bad idea. One of the biggest things that we have to be careful about is guarding the gates for our children. And this next story really kind of tells us just how difficult that is. Because, I know that parents don't do this with any malicious intention. You guys are good people. I understand that. And, your child is bugging you and you're just like, leave me alone. Here, play with this, right? Here, just play with this. And so you hand your phone to your 9-year-old and here you go, just play a video game. And of course, in your mind, he's going to stay right in this little box and be a really good little boy and stay sitting right there where you put him, right? Well, that's not really what happens, but that's what we imagine in our minds, right? That everything's going to work out perfectly when we do that. Well, that's not real. And so what is real is that we have enemies everywhere. And your adversary wants to be the one to have the birds and bees conversation with your children because the illicit, the temporal, the sensual, and the devilish want to be the ones to introduce them to that which is kadosh, so that they will get the wrong idea. Okay? And so you should not be surprised to see that this is a headline. You should not be surprised at that. You should go, oh boy, yep. Because the whole thing is geared toward ruining covenant fire before it even gets a chance. Ruining it before it even gets a chance to settle correctly in people's lives. And so look what they're doing to just 13-year-olds. TikTok's algorithm not only allows children to access illicit, sensual, devilish content and highly sexualized content, but it actively pushes them toward it, according to a report released on Friday. So accounts created by researchers posing as 13-year-olds quickly receive recommendations for, you guessed it, illicit content. Okay? So again, pose as a child and try it for yourself. If you're not sure, open an account on something your child is playing with. Say they're playing whoopdewoo.com and you go, what's that? And it's for kids. Open an account as a child and watch the emails you get. And you'll get an education on why you cannot hand your child in this era your phone and just walk away. Okay? If that thing is connected to the internet, it is not a closed loop of content that you approved every bit of it. And that kind of device you're handing, if it's not that, if you're handing them a device that's out there and connected to the internet and algorithms, okay, that's a terrible idea. That's a terrible idea. Buy your children books. Get them coloring. Get crayons. Other hand toys, play toys. And children like them better anyway. Okay? They like them better than the devices anyway. They'll play with that if you give it to them. But they'd much rather do other things. And so you really need to think about that, folks. And I'm just giving you a little fatherly nudge there because this stuff is beyond wicked. And its intentions are all the same, to steal your children's innocence. If they could, they'll steal the child. But if they can't, then they'll steal the innocence of the child, making a future victim. Okay? Ruining the innocence now so that it's much easier for them to make a future victim when they send somebody that was completely ruined along their way. This is also one of the things that happens is you have children that are prepped for abuse and children that are actually abused. And guess who meet each other? Okay, guess who meet each other? And so, folks, this is why it is our job as parents to be sober and vigilant in this hour. This is not something we can, look off, if you will. And so, again, something that I believe that, again, we have to be the ones to take that seriously. We have to be the ones that make the decisions for our children, for our families, to keep a certain content at bay. And if you don't, well, then unfortunately the repercussions are going to be that your children are going to, well, turn into the drones you're trying to avoid them being. By the way, support for Israel is something that we're also watching in the United States. And this is a very interesting thing that is starting to happen. American support for Israel is plummeting. I do believe as a result of a lot of the controversial information that came out on the Charlie Kirk stuff. And so Christian communities are really starting to push back against Israel. And I think that might be helping in resolving this war effort. Hopefully, again, cooler heads will prevail. American support for Israel has reversed nearly 2 years after the war in Gaza began. So you're seeing more and more, again, pushback on that. And I don't know that necessarily is good, but unless it results in less people dying, which is always a good thing. A major shift saw 35% of more than 1,300 registered voters say they side with the Palestinians. Ouch. That's not good. So for Israel's standpoint, they don't want sympathy to shift that hard, and that's what they're looking at right now. So that is a very difficult situation for them, and unfortunately is part of the change going on in the world as more information is coming out, isn't it? And here's the last story I want to bring up. And again, folks, we continue to see the demonic manifesting in our world. And this latest story is another tragedy that occurred at I think this was like a restaurant, a dockside in North Carolina. Yeah, it was a restaurant. And this guy opened fired, just 3 dead, 8 injured. That's a gunman on a boat. Opens fire on crowd at dockside North Carolina restaurant. Can you believe this? 3 people were killed and 8 were injured when a gunman fired numerous shots from a passing boat. So we don't have drive-by shootings. Now we have drive-by boatings. Can you believe this, folks? Into a crowded dockside North Carolina restaurant on Saturday night. Officials said the unidentified boater pulled up to the American Fish Company restaurant on Southport Yacht Basin, about 30 miles south of Wilmington, and opened fire on the crowd of unsuspecting diners at around 9:30 p.m. Can you imagine that? You're sitting there having your, fish, whatever, sandwich or something, and this guy just starts open firing, just starts blowing away. And 3 people died. The boater then took off in the intercoastal waterway before a person matching the shooter's description was spotted loading the vessel at a Merriam Oak Island, approximately 5 miles west of the scene at around 10 p.m. And so I think they caught the guy. It looks like they did, but that doesn't matter at this point. The wickedness is done. And as I told you guys, the demons will lift off a person as soon as they do this stuff. They don't stay with that person. So that person then comes back to themselves a lot of times, not even knowing what they did. It happens a lot more than you think. More and more people are being taken over by demonic forces. And it specifically says in the scripture that silly women are taken captive at the devil's will. Silly women laden with sins, taken captive at his will. So we do know that there are people that can be taken captive at his will. And one more thing for those of you that are hunters and out there supplementing your food and what have you, well, we continue to see these warnings. Now, I don't know. I'd love to hear from some of you hunters out there and tell me just how prevalent is this problem, because the way they make it sound, every deer out there is going to get you sick. Outbreak of viral deer killing disease prompts alarm warning to meat eaters. Okay, so stay away, scaring them off. What's going on here? An outbreak of the viral epizootic hemorrhagic disease is killing white-tailed deer in numerous eastern states. I didn't know that. So apparently there's a bunch of dead deer, and I didn't know anything about it. So anybody knows anything about a bunch of dead deer, please do let us know. It says humans are not at risk from handling or eating the meat of affected deer. So why are you telling us about it? If that's true, that humans are not at risk from handling or eating the meat, then why are you telling us about it? See what I mean? So it's interesting that they're making a big deal out of something that they want to also say doesn't really matter. It's not going to really affect you. It's really interesting how they continue to do this sort of double speak and drive you a little bit bananas with not really knowing what is or isn't true, what is or isn't real. And I think that's one of the things that we all have to be careful with, because after all, there continues to be a ton of misinformation and disinformation in the news cycle that we need to be careful with. One thing that I found very, very scary, did you guys hear about this particular judge that ruled against the Trump administration on some order that she defied the Trump administration on, and then her $1.5 million mansion burns down. That's a pretty nice mansion for a judge. I didn't know judges could afford $1.5 million properties, but apparently they can. And that one went up in smoke. So who smells a war going on? Who thinks maybe there's a little bit of conflict going on that's manifesting in different things like this, like the Chevron fire out on the West Coast as well? We're kind of wondering, like, whoa, what's going on here, right? So be safe out there and be aware that there are forces that are competing for the world stage. And again, just like you're seeing between nations, this is what was warned about in Matthew 24. Nation rides against nation, people against people, ethnic group against ethnic group, okay? All jockeying for power and control. This makes it very dangerous for the people on the ground. For the average person, makes it a dangerous time. And so this is why we need all the more, as we see the day approaching, we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another. That means to encourage one toward an end, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So if you're starting to go, oh man, the day is definitely approaching, that's all the more reason for you to be part of the assembly and connect in with your brothers and sisters wherever they are and wherever you can connect in the household of faith. Well, that's it for tonight. I pray this broadcast has been a barakah, a blessing to you. And I certainly hope we have been at least a little bit of an encouragement so that you're not fearful as you look at these things. That's our intention. We look at them together, take a little bit of the fear out of it. Yeah, there's some peril. Danger's real, but fear is a choice. And because we have perfect love, it's cast out all fear. Thank you so much for joining us. May Allah Hayam Baruch each and every one of you. Shalom.